So, which is it? Are the Chinese flipped out about our exploding debt or not? Illinois Congressman Mark Kirk joins us live in Washington. Nice to see you, Congressman.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, you're told one thing about our economy, and apparently the Treasury Secretary is told another.
There was an honesty moment when Secretary Geithner was in Peking University giving a speech. He said, "Your investments in $1 trillion worth of U.S. debt are secure," and the audience laughed at him. That's very un-Chinese to do, to embarrass a speaker in public. But I think it reflected a growing concern in Beijing.
And I guess we should point out the reason why they're concerned, the Chinese, why they care so much, is because they hold a significant portion of our debt.
Right. China has lent about $300 billion to the U.S. for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. They're very worried about that. Another $700 billion in Treasury bills. And they're particularly worried about the Fed's new policy of buying Treasury debt, because they're worried that one part of the federal government is buying another part of the federal government's debt. It sounds like printing money, and that means that if you hold dollar-denominated debt, all those investments will be worth less because you'll be repaid in printed dollars. What Secretary Geithner reflected was what the public statements of the Chinese government was, which is they are afraid that if they talk down the dollar too much, their own trillion-dollar investment will be cheapened. But privately, the key concern is, should we buy any more U.S. debt? And over time, what's happening is China is beginning to cancel Congress's credit card, doesn't want to lend much more money to the United States, and especially is worried about the Fed's policy of printing money to buy new debt.
So it isn't that the Secretary is deceitful or sugarcoating, it's that he's naive and was hoodwinked and wasn't there when they were talking candidly to you. Is that the story?
It's a common thing in Asia that you hear one thing in public and then you may hear some more direct concerns in private. And you have to listen to that because, unfortunately, China has become America's largest creditor. And if the Congress's plans go forward, we will borrow even more to spend on additional bills, a transportation bill, a health care bill, and our regular practice of waiving our budget constraints towards the end of the year.
Have you pulled the Secretary aside and said, look, you know, when you're out of the room, they're telling me they're really worried about our situation?
I'm fairly sure that he heard the same thing in private. And
so why would he say something else, a justifiable confidence? Why would he tell us something different?
Well, because both parties don't want to create a panic, but there is growing concern that the United States may not borrow $1.8 trillion. It may borrow even more, especially if it passes additional legislation on the Speaker's table. And that begins to look unsustainable. Also,
well, why would they lend at that point? I mean, if our credit is so lousy, if this is getting so grim, why in the world would the Chinese want to pick up any more of our debt? I wouldn't. I mean, if I were going to lend someone money, I'd want to say, you know, show me your cards. What do you got?
Well, they already are beginning to hedge. I think they expect quite a bit of inflation in the United States next year. So they've made a major investment. They funded a second strategic petroleum reserve, and they've planned to buy $80 billion worth of gold. That's 2 Fort Knoxes. Both of those investments only make sense if you expect significant dollar inflation.